I have 1 o'clock, and I'll just also note that we are recording and streaming on YouTube, so all of our sort of obligations are met there as well, and we have a quorum. So
great. Thanks, Ryan. Excellent. Well, with that in mind, let's get the show on the road over here. Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see you all. My name is Dan Garodnick. I'm very honored to serve as the new chair of the City Planning Commission. I'm very, very happy to be here today and to get to work with the public and with all of you, my esteemed fellow city planning commissioners. Very humbled to have been appointed to lead the Department of City Planning and this commission by Mayor Eric Adams, who is committed to ensuring that we expand access to opportunity for all New Yorkers and, of course, to getting stuff done. I started as the director of the department last week. I have since undergone a crash course in the important work of the department and the commission. I have been incredibly impressed with the level of brilliance of the people who work for this agency, as I know you all are, and have seen very closely over the years. And as you all know, this is my very first review session. I realize as we come together today that some of you know me, but for those of you who don't, very briefly, I am a lifelong New Yorker. I was born and raised in Manhattan, but I have family roots in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. I am a lawyer, husband, father of 2 boys. Immediately prior to my role at City Planning, I served as the president and CEO of Riverside Park Conservancy, which is a not-for-profit organization advocating for 6 miles of public space on the west side of Manhattan. Prior to that, I spent 12 years representing the east side of Manhattan in the city council. Some of my proudest accomplishments were in direct partnership with the City Planning Commission and the department as we successfully worked to modernize the greater East Midtown area, which of course is the business district around Grand Central Terminal. And we did it to ensure that one of our city's largest job centers would continue to thrive well into the future. During my time in government, I had the privilege of not only visiting all corners of the city, but also working directly with communities across all 5 boroughs. And I will say that the diversity, the energy, the complexity of New York is what I love about it. And every unique neighborhood will play a critical role in our success. That's also what makes our work together so exciting. So let's find a way to do it well, to do it fairly, and to do it expeditiously. We have a housing crisis, an affordability crisis, and a health crisis at the same time. The challenges are steep, but with the energy of this group and respectful discourse, I know that we will make progress together. Let me just take a second to acknowledge and thank both immediate former commission chairs, Anita Lermont and Marisa Lago, both of whom I admire deeply and have sought out for advice, for their leadership and dedication to the health and prosperity of our neighbors. We appreciate their service very much, and we're very lucky to have had them in this role. I think you will find that I'm a good listener. I am eager to learn, and I'm willing to hear competing views on any issue. And for these discussions, I am going to run a fair meeting. I will do my best to make sure that everyone's views are heard, but also to move the discussion along. So along those lines, if you wish to participate, do me a favor, use the raise hand function on your devices and I will call on you. So just keep it raised if you want to be heard. And once you have been heard, I would also ask that you just remove it. Otherwise, I may call on you another time and you may not want that. Also, I ask that you be patient with me as I learn the customs and the nuances of the procedure of this group as we go forward. So with that as an introduction, let's get to work. Ryan, I'm going to go to you to kick us off.
Thank you, Chair. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the New York City Planning Commission review session for Monday, February 14th, 2022. The first item on our agenda is a review of a state general project plan. Our presenter is Stephen Johnson.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, or LMDC, and the New York State Urban Development Corporation, doing business as Empire State Development, or ESD, is proposing an amendment to the World Trade Center Memorial and Cultural Program General Project Plan, which I will refer to in this presentation as the GPP. This proposed amendment to the GPP is related to one particular site on the southernmost edge of the campus, known as Site 5. The site was the location of the former Deutsche Bank building. According to ESD, the proposed amendment will be divided into two distinct phases. The first phase, which is what we are discussing today, is only looking at a single issue, and that is to modify the GPP to allow a use change to permit residential and community facilities on Site 5. The second phase, which contains all the details of the proposed development, including the possible zoning overrides, the percentage of affordable housing, the floor area, etc., will have a separate public hearing and will come back to the Commission for discussion in the next few months. ESD held a public hearing on the proposed amendment on January 12th, 2022, and the public comment period ends tomorrow on February 15th. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the World Trade Center GPP is to create a plan to redevelop the campus, the World Trade Center campus, after the attacks of the September 11th, 2001. The plan provides for commercial towers, public open space, a performing arts center, and cultural uses, and of course, the 9/11 memorial. In February 2006, the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation and the Port Authority signed an MOU to exchange parcels the Port Authority controlled, which is now the location of the memorial, for parcels including Site 5 that were controlled by LMDC. So these next slides will show information on what a proposed development could look like with a mixed-use building. In 2019, LMDC and the Port Authority released a request for proposals for the redevelopment of Site 5, which you can see on both of these illustrations outlined in red. Those are Site 5. On the left, the illustration, you can see the site, which is located between Washington Street and Greenwich Street, with the West Side Highway on the left, with the pedestrian overpass connecting to Battery Park City. Site 5 connects to Liberty Park and St. Nicholas Church. On the right, you can see the illustration is the World Trade Center campus turned 90 degrees. So we're looking at it from the west around Brookfield Place. You can see the Oculus drawing just in between Site 2 and 3. The massing for the building Site 5 is for a commercial tower with no setbacks or base heights. So a proposed mixed-use residential building would have a different massing and design from what we're seeing here. Next slide, please. So again, the proposed modification that we are discussing today is to permit the option of a mixed-use tower with residential and community facility uses, in addition to the commercial office and retail uses previously authorized on the development site. So this illustration on the left shows a possible ground floor for a mixed-use development, which will be detailed in the second phase of the amendment. You can see retail locations, lobbies, possible curb cuts for some sort of vehicular pass-through connection across the site. And the illustration on the right shows how Site 5, the tower, could possibly connect to Liberty Park from a pedestrian overpass connection from Site 5. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows a very broad list of the possible overrides that we'll be discussing in phase 2 in the upcoming months. And the one issue that we are discussing today is the one that is highlighted, the use change. Next slide, please. So this slide just has examples of possible programming for the 1.6 million square feet on Site 5 with the different uses, different amounts of square footage and the dwelling units. The commission received an updated draft of the GPP recommendation letter today that further emphasizes the 2 phases of this proposed amendment to the GPP, and that the commission is only making a recommendation on the use change and not any of the other overrides, the amount of affordable housing or the business terms, et cetera. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Let's go to the commissioners, and let's see who's got a hand raised here. So let's see.
I see Commissioner Bernie's hand up.
Great, Commissioner Bernie, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Could you just explain briefly why the amendment to the GPP is being done in 2 phases rather than in 1 phase?
I don't know if a clear explanation was given, but I know that there was a lot of concern from the community about having affordable housing on the site. And I think they wanted more affordable housing than what ESD was considering. So I know that was one issue. And I think also because of all the end of year related work for Penn GPP, I think the hearing got out ahead of itself, and the briefings didn't happen quite as often as we were hoping for. So I think the idea is to just make this a better project. So to split it into 2 phases, I think the idea is that the department sees the residential use as an important use that could be modified for the GPP, and that all the other maybe more difficult issues or just the other issues can be addressed with more time and more discussion.
Okay, I'm just wondering what is the benefit of going ahead with the use change now rather than doing it all in one package when the time comes? I guess that's just my only question.
I think because they had the public hearing and they set up the dates, so they went through that process, and I think that's when they got some perhaps we could call it pushback. So I think the idea is this is something that perhaps people can agree on moving forward, this one element.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Levin.
Yes, well, that's what was my first question here, and thank you for clarifying that aspect of the plan. My pointy-headed lawyer, nitpicky side of me looked at the notice of the public hearing, which was released in December, and we're in a process where we are required to provide comment on the full reach of the so-called amendment. I do hope that it's clear to the agency procedurally that we will get another opportunity to comment, because on its face, LMDC hasn't put out any indication that there will be a second opportunity to consider these issues. So you all have more access and ability to figure that out, but I'd be concerned that we not give up our chance to provide comment. But then my more substantive comment has to do with the whole discussion around affordable housing. And I understand that we're now putting that off until phase 2, and that this agency is not going to be in charge of the affordable housing component here. But I think we have to acknowledge that the amount and breadth of affordable housing is the key public issue for this really important site in Lower Manhattan. And as our new chair acknowledged in his introductory remarks, this city is facing a housing crisis and an affordability crisis. And I just wonder if our letter couldn't be a little stronger about our desire, urging the agencies involved to make every effort to maximize the amount of affordable housing that's produced here. I think the letter could be stronger on that very important public point. But not in a major way, but just with a couple of extra words would put some emphasis there to indicate that we are aware of that kind of public conversation and leaning into it.
Did you get a copy of the updated?
Yes, yes, and it's improved on that, but I think it could be even stronger if my colleagues agree.
I
And of
agree.
course, you've been having conversations with the other agencies, so I realize there's sensitivities here as well, but that's just personally how I'm feeling.
So before we go to, I know that there's a hand raised from, I believe from Commissioner Burney. Let's just go, before we go to the substantive question that Commissioner Levin just raised about how far we should lean in on the point of affordability at this moment in time when we're really just talking about change of use.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that two-phase issue, the second bite of the apple, and what our basis is for believing and knowing that we will have another chance at this to talk about everything from specific zoning provisions to all of the other things that we would want to know before we weighed in on the details of this proposal. Today is very narrow, but tell us what the basis is for us to believe that we're going to have another shot at it.
Yes, of course. So the basis is our discussions with ESD, who have told us that they're committed to separating into two phases. So that is how we've been proceeding at city planning, and that is how the recommendation letter reads. So the recommendation letter clearly delineates the two phases to acknowledge that. So I think if there were any issues about it, the letter will show that the City Planning Commission is only remarking on the use change.
And Stephen, I just want to also ask, and perhaps to comfort the commission, the building that they're showing us will require waivers for bulk. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And so they to get the building that they're showing us, they will have to come back for another GPP waiver to waive the bulk requirements. Great.
Do you see, Ryan, do you see hands raised before I call on the next, which I think I saw that there was possibly somebody.
Commissioner Cirillo has his hand up.
Okay, so before I go to Commissioner Cirillo, I will note, I agree with Commissioner Levin. I think we should just add, we don't need to do it in real time here, but I do think we should add a little bit of additional strength to the point of the affordability needs for this as a future site, even though we're not going to be doing it. I think it's important for us to at least make the point. And I would just, with your permission, I would like you to, at the end of this discussion, give us the ability to add that in and proceed. But we'll get to that when we get to the end of this conversation. But I do agree with you, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Cirillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate that recommendation you just made after Commissioner Levin's comments. And I won't restate my sense of that since it's being addressed. I have one question, though, that maybe digs just a minute in there just for clarity with respect to the two phases, perhaps based on the idea that we will modify the letter somewhat. But I just want to be clear that when you read the comments of the elected officials that were submitted and that was circulated earlier today, and thank you, Commissioner Levin, for those, there is a comment in there about that the mixed-use design guidelines as currently drafted are too restrictive and not sufficiently conducive to increasing affordability. I realize the affordability piece is coming in phase 2, but is there anything about our action today and the letter we're writing today that either specifically endorses or by inference supports those guidelines as we look to the conversation that occurs on affordability in the next phase? That's not clear to me. Is something that we're doing today embrace the guidelines that then might impact the conversation we would have in phase 2? And should that be addressed in any way today?
So I believe the only impacts that it would have is if design changes are made based on dwelling units. So obviously a commercial office tower would have a different design, build, and massing than a building with a large number of residential units. But they would be coming back in phase 2 to discuss, to get an override if necessary for height, setback, pedestrian circulation, floor area. So all the different issues related to bulk and use that they need to get waivers for, they would have to come back, and we would then have the discussion then over what they're looking to design there.
Okay, I appreciate that, Stephen. I guess and that's how I would hope it would work. My concern was that when they come back in that phase for those things, those actions, that they're going to be bound in some way by the guidelines that exist today that we're not commenting on, so that it's all still going to be framed in a more restrictive way based on something we're doing today. And I was trying to see if that was a possibility, so that the conversation that occurs in phase 2 is, yes, you're right, but these were the guidelines that phase 1 approved, and we're working within those guidelines.
Commissioner Cerullo, no, that's a very good point and a very good question. The state has deferred any change to the design guidelines to phase 2. So there is no discussion of the guidelines today. So nothing that the commission is doing today would lock in a form, a development, a program. All the commission really is doing today, primarily, is to say that a change of use to allow residential use is a fine thing at this site. From the staff's perspective, we think it is a very good thing to have more lively use at the southern end of the World Trade Center. We know the area down here, Lower Manhattan, we're all here, right? It can be a little sleepy, so seeing that change of use would be a good thing. And then with the added language, to bolstering, the importance of affordable housing, where we can, that will be another point, of course, in the letter. And that's really it for today. And then later, in phase 2, there'll be specifics on the guidelines, on the program, et cetera. So today is just really a statement about the receptivity of the commission to the change of use as a primary thing.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Edith, and thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cerullo. Let's go to Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to get a clarification on process here, because I know this is a zoning override, and I know that where there is an override to be implemented, comment must be elicited from DCP. But I just want to understand, they're asking for a waiver of a number of our zoning regulations. So I want to understand the asking of a waiver versus asking a request for a waiver versus the zoning override. I mean, how does that work?
Sure. So none of the waivers are being requested at this point. So what they're asking for is a modification to the GPP, which will mod the existing GPP to allow residential and community facility development in addition to what was previously approved for a commercial office tower. So the waivers, those were just highlighting what's going to be in phase 2 in the future.
Okay, but I guess my point is, if there's a zoning override, then that would seem to obviate a request for a waiver, or am I?
So they're not, so what you're calling an override, they're just asking for a modification of use.
Okay.
So the site was proposed in the redevelopment of the campus as commercial office on all the different sites, in addition to the memorial and the cultural uses. So that changed with this particular site, Site 5 on the southernmost end of the campus. And there's been requests to make it more of a residential tower or have some part of a mixed-use building with residential, which was not permitted from the previous GPP.
Understood. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm looking to see if there are other hands on this matter. I do not see any. If you wish to say anything more on this item, please speak now, or at least for a moment, hold your peace, and we are going to move on to the next item, but I don't see any hands. So what I would like to do here is to get an assent by voice vote to send this letter as amended, and we are going to tweak it slightly just to strengthen the point about the need for affordability in this building. So we'd like assent by voice vote to send the letter as we will amend it to include that provision to the Empire State Development Corporation. And with that, I'd like to ask for all in favor to please say yay.
Hey,
Yay.
Any opposed, say nay. Excellent. The yays have it. We're going to move on to our next item, which is a Queen certification. Ryan.
That's right. This is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Queens Community District 1. Our presenter is Sarit Platkin. I'll note that Commissioner Rampashad is recused on this item.
Thank you, Ryan.
Sarit.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by JPP 33rd Street LLC and Lillian John Realty for a series of land use actions. Next slide, please. The land use actions include a zoning map amendment to change an R5 district to an M15 R6A MX district, and a zoning text amendment to Appendix F to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area, and to zoning resolution Article 12, Chapter 13 or Chapter 3 to modify an MX district, MX23, to establish an M15 R6A district with a maximum base height of 75 feet and a maximum building height of 95 feet in Northwest Ravenswood, Queens. These actions would facilitate an approximately 500,000 square foot mixed-use development comprised of 2 8-story buildings with 352 dwelling units, including between 88 and 105 permanently affordable units, and approximately 150,000 square feet of commercial and light industrial uses. Next slide, please. Ravenswood is situated just north of Long Island City and south of Astoria, east of Roosevelt Island along the East River waterfront. Historically, Ravenswood has served as a transitional mixed-use area between the Long Island City Industrial Business Zone south of 36th Avenue and more residential Astoria neighborhood north of Broadway. This area is well served by transit, including the Q104 and Q103 bus lines that run along Broadway and Vernon Boulevards, respectively. The Broadway subway station, with access to the N&W lines, is located approximately 3/4 of a mile east of the project area, and the 21st Street Queensbridge subway station on the F line is located approximately 1 mile south. The Astoria stop of the New York City Ferry is also located approximately 1/2 mile north on the Howlett's Peninsula. The area is served by public open space along the waterfront, including Rainey Park and the Socrates Sculpture Park, and a growing cluster of arts uses, such as the Noguchi Museum and the aforementioned Socrates Sculpture Park. The area is also proximate to several local institutional uses and growing job clusters, including tech and life sciences with Cornell Tech campus and on Roosevelt Island, healthcare with Mount Sinai Hospital to the north, education with Long Island City High School to the east, and industrial and commercial uses with the Long Island City Industrial Business Zone to the south. Given the area's strategic location, development interest has increased in recent years, including a cluster of private applications highlighted in pink and blue, with this private application being number 2 on the map. In light of community aspirations for a more cohesive vision to guide private development in this area, the department developed a planning framework in 2019 for the area outlined in red. Next slide, please. This map shows the broader context area for the 11th Street and 34th Avenue rezoning, with the project area outlined in the dotted red line and the Northwest Ravenswood Framework Study area outlined in a solid red line. The Northwest Ravenswood area includes a mix of residential, commercial, light industrial, and community facility uses. While the largest share of land uses is manufacturing at 45% of the total, the area retains lower density residential R5 zoning mapped with the establishment of the 1961 zoning resolution. This mismatch between the R5 zoning and existing mix of uses has been the primary driver of private application activity in the area. This cluster of private applications also generated ongoing community concern and aspiration for zoning that would better enable affordable housing and jobs, be consistent with community needs, and better serve the 20,000 NYCHA residents in Western Queens. Next slide, please. In response to community concerns, the Northwest Ravenswood Framework is intended to leverage the area's historic industrial character and proximity to growing job clusters in the arts, healthcare, tech, and life science to create opportunities for new mixed-use development with community-serving job uses and affordable housing. In addition to proximity to growing sectors, several existing conditions in the area are assets to repositioning Northwest Ravenswood for mixed-use development. The many large sites, over 20,000 square feet, are ideal conditions for accommodating a mix of industrial and residential uses side by side by allowing space for separate entrances and vehicle access. Existing industrial loft buildings are also conducive to commercial or mixed-use retrofits. To realize this mix of uses, the framework called for MX districts with R7 densities on major corridors, including Broadway, Vernon, and 36th Avenue, seen in solid black lines on the map. It also called for a mix of R7 and R6 densities on wide streets, including 34th and 35th avenues, and more moderate R6B contextual districts on narrow streets. These residential districts would be paired with M14 and M15 manufacturing zones to reduce the parking requirement for non-residential uses and in turn, better facilitate job growth. The 11th Street and 34th Avenue proposal, which I will be discussing today, outlined in a dotted red line, aligns with the framework laid out for the broader surrounding area. I will also note that several local organizations were engaged throughout the process for developing the framework, including Queens Community Board 1, the Old Astoria Neighborhood Association, the Justice for All Coalition, and the Queensbridge Houses Tenant Association. Next slide, please. Now, shifting into focusing on the 11th Street and 34th Avenue rezoning project area, the surrounding area includes a mix of residential, commercial, light industrial, community facility, and park uses. The area to the north of the site is characterized by 2 to 3 story residential buildings and 4 to 6 story pre-war multifamily walk-up apartment buildings. The prevailing built form directly adjacent and to the south of the site includes low-scale, high lot coverage commercial and industrial buildings that house food production, warehousing and distribution, and automobile repair uses. Retail is concentrated along Broadway, 2 blocks north of the project area, which also serves as a boundary between the more residential Astoria neighborhood to the north and more mixed-use and industrial Ravenswood neighborhood to the south. New 6 to 8 story multifamily residential buildings can be found north and east of the project area along Broadway. The New York City Housing Authority Ravenswood houses, consisting of approximately 2,200 units across 31 6 and 7 story buildings, is located directly southeast of the project area, and the North Queensview Homes Cooperative with 21 14 and 15 story apartment buildings is located 2 blocks east of the project area. The surrounding area is predominantly mapped with non-contextual residential districts to the south and west and low and mid-density contextual districts to the north and east. Recent land use actions in the surrounding area include the 2019 Vernon Boulevard Broadway rezoning to the northwest of the project, in which a full block site was rezoned from R5 to R7X C13 and R6B, and a large scale plan was established to facilitate 300 residential units, commercial and community facility arts uses in 3 5 to 14 story buildings. Broadway and 11th Street, the rezoning of another full block site from R5 to an M14 R7A and zoning text amendment to establish an MIH area and special mixed use district MX23 is located 2 blocks north of the project area. The project area is also 2 blocks south of the 2010 Astoria rezoning area, a contextual rezoning which encompassed 238 blocks located north of Broadway in Western Astoria. Next slide, please. The project area consists of the entirety of Block 318, which includes 5 contiguous tax lots that have a combined lot area of approximately 110,000 square feet. The project area has frontage on 2 wide streets, 11th Street and 34th Avenue, and 2 narrow streets, 12th Street and 33rd Road. The project area includes 2 development sites. Development Site 1 consists of Block 318, lots 15 and 22 on the northern portion of the block, and is an approximately 57,000 square foot corner and through lot with frontage on 11th Street, 12th Street, and 33rd Road. It is improved with an approximately 55,000 square foot, 1-story, 1 FAR warehouse of food production and distribution use. Development Site 2 consists of Block 318, Lot 1 on the majority of the southern portion of the block and is an approximately 40,000 square foot corner and through lot. It is improved with 3 buildings that total approximately 40,000 square feet or 1 FAR. The buildings include a 3-story, 50-foot tall building along 12th Street and 34th Avenue, a 1-story warehouse mid-block on 12th Street, and a 1-story warehouse on 34th Avenue. These buildings are occupied by auto repair and office uses. Lot 2 also contains open parking uses along the 11th Street frontage. There are also 2 non-applicant controlled sites in the project area, lots 9 and 11. Lot 9 is improved by a 2-story, 2-family apartment building, and Lot 11 by a 1-story building occupied by auto repair uses. There are 2 existing curb cuts on 34th Avenue, 5 on 11th Street, and 5 on 12th Street. Next slide, please. Here you can see views of Site 1 southeast from 12th Street that show the 1-story food production warehouse use. Next slide, please. Here you can see views of Site 2 northwest from 34th Avenue that show the 3-story office use from different perspectives. Next slide, please. The actions would facilitate an approximately 500,000 square foot mixed-use development comprised of 2 8-story buildings with 352 dwelling units, including between 88 to 105 permanently affordable units and 150,000 square feet of commercial and light industrial uses. Development Site 1 on the northern portion of the block would contain an 8-story mixed-use building totaling approximately 5 FAR, containing 204 units, including 51 to 61 permanently affordable units pursuant to the MIH program. It would contain approximately 90,000 square feet of commercial and light industrial floor area, including local retail, 2 trade schools, artist studio space, and office space. Development Site 2 on the southern portion of the block would contain an 8-story mixed-use building totaling approximately 5 FAR, containing 140 residential units, including 37 to 44 permanently affordable units pursuant to the MIH program. It would contain approximately 60,000 square feet of light industrial and commercial floor area, including local retail, a food distributor, community facility uses, and office space. Next slide, please. The proposed development wraps the entire block with a continuous street wall on each frontage, including active first floors. The building would rise to a height of 95 feet along 34th Avenue above a base height of 75 feet. The building mass will step down to 75 feet and 55 feet mid-block. Next slide, please. As enumerated in the department's 2018 report, Can Mixed-Use Buildings Work in NYC? Larger lots over 20,000 square feet with multiple frontages allow for more physically efficient mixed-use buildings and a reduction of conflicts between uses. As visible on this ground floor site plan, the proposed development captures the benefits of the full block site size and multiple frontages to segregate the pedestrian-facing commercial and residential uses on 11th Street and the East-West Avenues from the industrial and auto-oriented uses on 12th Street. This approach will foster the creation of a continuous commercial frontage along 11th Street, a wide street, an important north-south connector in Western Queens, and prevent pedestrian conflicts in 12th Street's industrial loading zones. The ground floor of Development Site 1 will contain a mix of non-residential uses, including an approximately 6,000 square foot artist studio and 12,000 square foot local retail space along 11th Street, and an approximately 20,000 square foot construction trade school and 10,000 square foot film TV training school on 12th Street. The largest tenant, the construction trade school, will occupy a double height, 35-foot tall space and will be operated by the local nonprofit Andromeda Community Initiative. The Andromeda Initiative provides hands-on training for individuals who lack the basic experience, training, and resources to obtain employment in the New York City construction industry. The school would provide construction training specializing in scaffolding. The second, smaller trade school would be operated in association with York Studios, which has studios in Maspeth and Soundview to offer training in film and television production. The ground floor of development site 2 will contain approximately 8,000 square feet of local retail space on the 11th Street frontage and approximately 25,000 square feet of food production space on the 12th Street frontage. A food production tenant that specializes in Asian dry goods for restaurants and supermarkets in the New York City area has been identified for the space. This business currently has a location in New Jersey and plans to expand to this site to better serve Queens and Brooklyn customers. The development is anticipated to facilitate approximately 370 jobs. Parking and loading will be consolidated mid-block with a 30-foot wide curb cut on 11th Street and a 20-foot wide curb cut on 12th Street. 160 attended accessory off-street parking spaces and approximately 190 bike parking spaces will be provided in the cellar. Accessory off-street loading berths will be provided on 11th Street and 12th Street to serve the non-residential businesses. To mitigate potential adverse impacts related to traffic and pedestrian circulation, the applicants will implement project components related to the environment and mitigation measures associated with the project's environmental assessment statement. These measures will include traffic calming at the intersection of 11th Street and 33rd Road and an all-way stop sign at the intersection of 12th Street and 34th Avenue. These pedestrian safety measures will be subject to approval by the New York City Department of Transportation and must be installed prior to the applicants obtaining temporary or permanent certificates of occupancy for the proposed development. Next slide, please. As you can see in this section, the construction trade school will occupy a double height, 35-foot tall training space, and the film school will occupy a 20-foot tall ground floor space. Accessory office for the trade schools will occupy the second story. Next slide, please. As visible in this section, the food distribution and retail uses will occupy 20-foot tall ground floor spaces. The second floor would have approximately 20,000 square feet of office space intended for technology, advertising, media, and information tenants, and approximately 10,000 square feet of community facility space intended for a local nonprofit organization. Given the constraints of the R6A and M15 building envelopes, the industrial space across both sites could not achieve floor-to-floor heights that meet industry standards, which led to the applicants considering the text amendment to increase base and maximum heights. Next slide, please. Here you can see a view of the proposed development looking north from 34th Avenue towards the proposed 95-foot tall maximum height on 34th Avenue that steps down to 75 feet and 55 feet mid-block. The proposed development, which will range in height from 4 to 8 stories, would be in context with the 4-story multifamily context visible to the west on 11th Street, the 6- and 7-story Ravenswood houses directly southeast across 34th Avenue, and the 14- and 15-story North Queensview homes 2 blocks east of the proposed development. Next slide, please. Here you can see a view of the proposed development looking south along 11th Street, which illustrates the visual variety of the facade with setbacks at 55 and 75 feet respectively across the block, the glazing creating a continuous active ground floor, and the out parcels mid-block. The surrounding context of lower density manufacturing uses on 12th Street is also visible here as well. Next slide, please. The proposed actions include a zoning map amendment to change an R5 district to an M15 R6A MX district, and a zoning text amendment to Appendix F to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area, and to zoning resolution Article 12, Chapter 3 to modify an MX district, MX23, to establish an M15 R6A district with a maximum base height of 75 feet and a maximum building height of 95 feet in Northwest Ravenswood, Queens. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes a zoning map amendment to rezone the project area, a full tax block, from R5 to M15 R6A. The transition from an R5 district to an M15 R6A district would promote mixed-use development with affordable housing and job growth on an underutilized property. MX districts permit a wide variety of uses, including residential, commercial, community facility, and manufacturing uses. The proposed M15 R6A district would permit new mixed-use development with a maximum residential FAR of 3.6 in an MIH area, a maximum community facility FAR of 3.0, and maximum commercial and manufacturing FARs of 5.0. While R6A typically permits a base height of between 40 and 65 feet and maximum building height of 80 or 85 feet with a qualifying ground floor in MIH areas, the proposed text amendment would increase the base and maximum heights to permit a base height of between 40 and 75 feet with a maximum building height of 90 feet or 95 feet with a qualifying ground floor in MIH areas. Off-street parking is required for 50% of the building's dwelling units, with an exemption for income-restricted units within the transit zone. The R6A density reflects the medium density residential context on the west side of 11th Street, while the corresponding R7A bulk envelope better accommodates the significant amount of non-residential use being proposed on site by addressing the constraints of the R6A and M15 building envelopes, which would limit the floor-to-floor heights of the non-residential use. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes to map the project area as a mandatory inclusionary housing area by creating a new MIH area for Queens Community District 1 in Appendix F of the zoning resolution, highlighted by the red arrow on the MIH map. Pursuant to the MIH program, the applicants are proposing both MIH Option 1 and MIH Option 2. Option 1 requires affordable housing to be provided equivalent to 25% of the residential floor area developed at an average of 60% of the area median income, with 10% at 40% of the area median income. Option 2 requires affordable housing to be provided equivalent to 30% of the residential floor area developed at an average of 80% of the area median income. The proposed development would facilitate between 88 permanently affordable units through Option 1 and 105 permanently affordable units through Option 2. Next slide, please. In summary, this is an application by JPP 33rd Street LLC and Lillian John Realty for a zoning map amendment and zoning text amendment to facilitate the development of an approximately 500,000 square foot mixed-use development comprised of 2 8-story buildings with 352 dwelling units, including between 88 to 105 permanently affordable units and approximately 150,000 square feet of commercial and light industrial uses in Ravenswood Community District 1, Queens. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Sarit. I'm going to look to commissioners for questions. Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I had some questions about the rationale for the retail, digging into the numbers a little bit. I see there's about, building 1, site 1, 12,000 square feet of retail proposed, site 2, another 8,000. And when you look at the site plan, they're actually split, right? One is on 33rd and one is facing 34th. I would like to know if you have any sense of the rationale for the decision making. I'm familiar with that area. I actually live on 34th Avenue, but much further in Queens. It's an area lacking visibility to existing anchors. Noguchi, Socrates, and Costco are, block and a half away, which is where you see a cluster. If you want retail to succeed, you probably want it where people are going. And so I'm curious, whether they have tenants in mind, what kinds of tenants. There are already small bodegas and coffee shops that are probably meeting those sort of convenience needs, and they certainly don't need 8,000 or 11,000 square feet of space. Those uses typically fill much smaller spaces. So just more information on that would be helpful. And my question is zoning driving the decision to put retail on the ground floor, or is this the developer's assessment of, the market opportunities?
Sure. So I guess just to answer, your first question more broadly about the amount of retail at this location, I think that, this, was very much kind of an ongoing conversation between the department and the developers to kind of locate retail at this location, responding to some of the needs that, have been identified in the surrounding area. You noted some of the, some of the surrounding anchors like Socrates and Noguchi Museum. So clearly there are, several, active uses directly west of this site. This area is sort of part of what feels like a missing middle in Astoria, where it is sort of between the waterfront and between sort of more active uses on 21st Street. And so there does, appear to be a need for additional retail and amenities to be established kind of west of 21st Street in this area that can kind of address some of that gap that we're seeing. We also, definitely see the potential for this site, which is, on 11th Street, which is a really crucial and important north-south connector in Western Queens that really runs, an important length of the north-south trajectory in Western Queens to kind of become more active and, become a more well-established commercial corridor. And create a more cohesive character here. I think as far as, identifying tenants, the applicants, to my knowledge, can definitely speak more to that. They've been focused more on sort of the industrial tenants to date, but we can definitely try and find out more from them on that. And yeah, I think that's sort of the high level of kind of where we've ended up on the retail, just, seeing the opportunity for synergy with kind of nearby open space and arts uses and the opportunity to strengthen retail here overall.
But I will also add, and Sarit, correct me, that the MX district itself does not require it, and so it's agnostic, and the space that you're seeing is what they think would happen, but I think that it could evolve.
That's correct. There is nothing precluding this from kind of these intended plans from changing over time.
Mm-hmm. I guess, and you've heard me say this again and again, where is the city's rationale on creating, isolated micro pockets of retail offerings, that are discrete and distinct from our existing commercial corridors that we of course want to support, that are struggling now and recovering from COVID. So, every time we, it's like death by 1,000 cuts, every time we sort of drop a little bit of retail here and there in places where it's not particularly visible, it's a block and a half, which is quite a distance of not very walkable streets. Those are very industrial streets from the waterfront, where someone wants to go and purchase the kind of thing that they might want to purchase when they visit the museum or the park. They probably wouldn't find this. It's not best suited for those customers. So I just would really like to understand that rationale. I don't yet see it making sense. So
I guess I will just add one thing on this walkability question and visibility question, which is that, this is directly, southeast of the Vernon Boulevard and Broadway rezoning, which is anticipated to result in kind of active commercial corridor or active commercial frontage. And so that would be kind of more of the bridge between sort of like the waterfront and Noguchi Museum to this site. So we could, kind of thinking about this area as a whole and the other rezonings that have advanced, like this would kind of become more of a continuation of the character that's being developed through this series of land use actions.
Commissioner Ortiz, we do absolutely hear your concerns that you're expressing with respect to potentially diminishing the robustness of commercial corridors throughout Astoria. Astoria, of course, traditionally has some of our most robust and successful commercial corridors in our entire city. And so it is certainly important to us that we continue to do what we can to support those through both zoning and business support. In this case, you know, I certainly appreciate you raising 34th Avenue, because in this case, we did see there being an opportunity given the proximity to Ravenswood Houses, which is just kitty corner to the southeast from here, where, you know, the campus hasn't traditionally had a lot of amenities and resources in terms of small retail that it has had access to. And so we do want to make sure that we're sort of strategic in providing some of these opportunities for smaller retail, but also we agree being cognizant of not detracting from our large and robust corridors.
Thank you, Commissioner Ortiz. Before I go to Commissioner Levin, I have a question too. On the evolution point, you know, this is a site which today at the point of certification is proposing that there be an artist studio, local retail, trade school, food distribution. On the notion that these sites could evolve over time, tell us what the alternatives could be under the existing, the proposed new zoning that is being contemplated here.
Sure. So, you know, given that the MX district is being mapped, you know, a full breadth of residential, commercial, community facility uses and, you know, retail uses would be possible here. In the event that there appears to be kind of less of a market for retail uses, there, you know, clearly are tenants already identified for industrial and community facility uses. There could be a future in which, you know, future additional tenants for industrial or office uses are identified here. You know, this really is kind of building also on the markets of the growing job clusters, which were mentioned at the top of the presentation. And so there is kind of an opportunity here for additional office, community facility, and industrial space.
Great, thank you. Let me go to Commissioner Levin.
Yes, thank you. Sticking with program, but a different piece of the program. Can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of housing that is proposed? What do we know about the unit mix? What they're mapping both option 1 and option 2, which I guess creates the greatest flexibility. What's the local AMI? What's the need for affordable housing there? And what kind of families or households are targeted for this project?
Great, thanks so much. So I can fill in some of the gaps there and then the applicants can do the rest. As far as the local AMI, that is approximately 64,000 in this section of Astoria. What the applicants, you know, with the applicants targeting both options 1 and option 2, you know, I will flag that, you know, Community Board 1's preference in the past has been for option 1, which, you know, more clearly aligns with the AMI in the area, and previous projects, including in this Ravenswood section, such as, you know, Broadway and 11th Street, have been modified from both options to option 1 by the local council member. We have, you know, new council members here, but it is possible that, you know, such a change could happen in the future. As for kind of unit mix and the specific income breakdown, I will defer to the applicants on that and make sure that they're prepared to speak more to that at the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. And do you know anything about unit sizes? Are these family size units, studios? What do we know?
I will need to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
And I do just want to add that, you know, in our engagement with the NYCHA residents in this area, one of the things that they do tend to share with us is that there is a desire that their children and their family members be able to find units within this community. It is really important that they don't feel that they have to be moving to, you know, the outskirts of Queens and other boroughs in order to still be able to live in the city. And so it really is a priority for them that they be able to still remain in close contact with these communities. And so that has certainly driven some of the preferences for affordability in the proposals that we've seen as well.
That's great. I would support that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there other commissioners who have questions for our Queens team on this application? I see no hands raised. Seeing none, this matter is certified. We'll now move on to item 3 today, Bronx pre-hearing, Our Lady of Pity. Ryan, go ahead.
Right, we have a zoning, pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendments in Bronx Community District 1. And our presenter is Justin Lamorella.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. This is a pre-hearing item for the Our Lady of Pity application, which is seeking a zoning map amendment and zoning text amendment to facilitate the development of 2 9-story residential buildings with approximately 205 dwelling units at 272 East 151st Street in the Melrose neighborhood of Community District 1 in the Bronx. Next slide, please. The applicant, Our Lady of Pity, LLC, is an affiliate of the Association of New York Catholic Homes, which is the housing development office of Catholic Charities of New York. They are proposing a zoning map amendment from an R6 to an R7A zoning district and the creation of a new MIH area at the site of the former Our Lady of Pity Church. Next slide, please. The surrounding area has a mix of residential, commercial, and community facility uses with a mix of building types and scales, and is predominantly in R7 or R7 equivalent zoning districts. The area is located within the transit zone served by bus, subway, and commuter rail lines. The 2, 4, and 5 subway lines are located a few blocks south at 149th Street. The BX32 bus runs along Morris Avenue, and the BX2, 9, and 19 run along 149th Street. The Melrose Metro North Station is also located 4 blocks north of the proposed development site. Also to the north of the project area is Governor Smith Playground, which includes a track and football field. And not included on this map, but a rezoning to extend the C14 commercial overlay north along Morris Avenue was recently approved by the Commission and City Council. Next slide, please. Today, the proposed rezoning area includes an R6 zoning district with a portion covered by a C14 commercial overlay. R6 districts permit a residential FAR of 2.43 and community facility FAR of 4.8. C14 commercial overlays allow for local retail uses with an FAR of 2.0. The development site is 70 feet east of Morris Avenue and is comprised of lots 14, 72, and 77. The non-applicant owned lots are lots 1 and 3 through 9 along Morris Avenue between East 150th Street and East 151st Street. Next slide, please. This photo shows the non-applicant owned lots within the rezoning area. Lot 1 is improved with a 4-story building, and that's on the right of this photo, while the remaining lots have 3-story buildings with that are mixed use with residential upper floors and ground floor community facility uses or retail uses. Next slide, please. This photo shows the development site at 272 East 151st Street, looking south, and was the former home of the parish of Our Lady of Pity. On November 30th, 2017, the church was deconsecrated by the Archbishop of New York, and the site was fully demolished between 2020 and 2021 and currently sits vacant. Next slide, please. So the applicant is proposing 2 9-story buildings with about 205 units of 100% affordable housing. One building will be built fronting East 150th Street and the other fronting East 151st Street. The proposed development will have a total FAR of approximately 4.5. The proposal will also provide a landscaped interior courtyard for open space between the 2 buildings. It is within the transit zone and therefore no parking is required and none are proposed in the application. Next slide, please. The applicant is still working on the financing for this proposal and is currently proposing a mix of units with 48 to 66 studio apartments, 42 to 46 1-bedroom apartments, 71 to 72 2-bedrooms, and 22 to 26 3-bedrooms. The buildings will be 100% affordable using financing by either the state or the city, and they'll be targeting income bands between 40 to 70% of AMI. Next slide, please. The applicant requests a zoning map amendment change from an R6 to an R7A zoning district. R7A districts have a max FAR of 4.6 and a max height of 95 feet. The proposed district would be consistent with maximum building heights in the surrounding area for buildings in the adjacent R7 and R7 equivalent districts. The applicant is also seeking a zoning text amendment of Appendix F of the zoning resolution to classify the project as a mandatory inclusionary housing area. They're proposing both options 1 and 2. And so that would require that between 52 to 62 of the approximately 205 proposed units be permanently affordable. And as a point of reference, the median household income and the approximate neighborhood tabulation area is around $26,800 per year. Next slide, please. The application was certified on November 1st, 2021, and referred out to Bronx Community Board 1. The board held a public hearing on December 16th and submitted a recommendation to disapprove the project with 1 in favor, 22 against, and 0 abstaining. The reasons for this vote included the scale and height of the buildings and overdevelopment, the lack of parking in the area, traffic congestion and construction impacts, impacts on hospital and school facilities, and considerations around public safety and environmental impacts. I should note that the applicant team is currently working to address the community's concerns around parking and will be prepared to update you all on Wednesday. The Bronx Borough President held a public hearing on January 10th, 2022, and issued a recommendation to approve the application, citing urgent needs for affordable housing and services that provide guidance and assistance, the inclusion of multi-bedroom units, the inclusion of indoor recreation room and outdoor garden areas for residents, supportive services, including access to employment and job training, and that the setbacks and terraces proposed with the buildings will minimize height impacts on surrounding buildings. Next slide, please. So the public hearing will take place on Wednesday, where the applicant team will present and can answer any questions. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. We appreciate it. I'm going to see if there are questions from the commissioners. I will note, as I look to see if there are any hands coming up, I want to recognize the new borough president of the Bronx in making a statement here about the need for affordable housing, which I think is important and impressive. So I think it's worth saying out loud. Okay, let's see. I don't see any hands raised, which is okay. Give it a couple seconds here. All right, seeing none, we will bring this up at the public hearing on Wednesday, the 16th. Justin, we will see you then. Thanks for that. Now we're going to go on to a Queens pre-hearing on Guy Brewer Boulevard. So Ryan, you want to bring that in?
This is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Queens Community District 13. Our presenter is Scott Solomon.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. And you can move on to the next slide. So this is a private application by Rambier LLC seeking approval of a zoning map amendment and zoning text amendment to facilitate a mixed-use development at the intersection of 2 wide streets, Guy Brewer Boulevard and 147th Avenue, in the Springfield Gardens neighborhood of Queens Community District 13. The application was certified by the CPC on November 1st, hearing scheduled for Wednesday. Next slide. In terms of the proposed development, these actions would facilitate a new 38,685 square foot, 8-story mixed-use building with approximately 3,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space and 45 dwelling units on the upper floors. The total FAR is 3.59, just under the 3.6 max. Applicant intends to map both MIH options 1 and 2, but prefers option 1, which would require approximately 11 permanently affordable units. The higher range of option 2 would require 14 MIH units. 23 attended parking spaces are proposed, 23 are required. The building consists of a 6-story base that wraps around the intersection of Guyer Brewer Boulevard and 147th Avenue. Then after 10-foot required setbacks, rising to 8 stories for 83 feet. Parking is located within side rear yard equivalent with access from 147th Avenue. Next slide. In order to facilitate the proposed building, applicant requests a zoning map amendment, changing the existing R32 district to R6A and establishing a C22 commercial overlay district. R6A districts in MIH areas allow a residential FAR of 3.6 and 3.0 for community facility uses. Next slide. A corresponding zoning text amendment to map both MIH options 1 and 2 are proposed. Again, the applicant indicating the preference to pursue option 1. This would be the first MIH area mapped in Community District 13. Per the applicant, the land use rationale for the proposed rezoning is to facilitate housing production on an underutilized site to meet the growing demand of housing consistent with Housing New York, located on an intersection of 2 wide thoroughfares with access to several bus transit routes, several stops adjacent to the development site. Applicant also believes the R6A to be appropriate transition, buffering the industrial uses to the south and the low density uses to the north and east of the project area. The ground floor retail would also serve to activate the street frontage and enhance the pedestrian experience compared to the current vacant lot, previous uses of open parking, or any as of right R32 development. Finally, the rezoning would bring existing legal non-conforming commercial uses in the project area into conformance. Next slide. Following certification, Community Board 13 voted to disapprove by a vote of 32-0, expressing concerns about the height and density of the building being a threat to the existing neighborhood character. And the borough president expressed similar concerns, but recommended approval with the primary condition to change the proposed residential zoning district from R6A to R6B. He also conditioned his approval on the project area being reduced to development site only. And then additional conditions were to address CB13 and affected civic associations' concerns for local businesses to be recruited as tenants for the new commercial space, to utilize union labor for construction and maintenance of the building, for the proposed construction to utilize sustainability and energy efficiency standards, and then a minimum 30% goal to include WBE firms, hiring of local residents, and working with local organizations and the hiring contracting for the project. Following the BP hearing, the applicant convened a meeting with 2 civic associations, a representative of Councilmember Brooks Powers and the borough president, where they presented a modified development reflecting the borough president's preferred R6B C22 envelope. Next slide, please. On the right is an elevation and summary of the R6B envelope presented at that meeting. The building would achieve a FAR of 2.2, the maximum permitted in an R6B, would top out at 5 stories, and would include 27 dwelling units. 7 to 8 would be subject to the MIH regulations. So there would be a significant decrease in the overall housing production and required permanently affordable housing units. And although there are less units compared to the R6A development and less parking spaces would be required, they would still be providing the same 23 parking spaces. The general footprint of the building and parking layout would be unchanged compared to the R6A building. And the applicant is going to be prepared to discuss the preferred R6A development and the alternative R6B presented to the borough president and others during Wednesday's hearing. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Let's see what we've got here. All right, Mr. Vice Chairman, floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. So Scott, is the applicant, is he going to embrace the R6B alternative, or does he want to proceed with the R6A? What's his posture? Their posture, I should say.
So they express openness to the R6B, but still reiterated the strong and appropriate land use rationale for density here. The borough office, the agency believes R6A is an appropriate bulk here, but the applicant was responding to the borough president. They asked to see R6B, and they still presented it and showed willingness to adjust to that. But there is a preference here to still continue with R6A as proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Ramprashad, I saw your hand. I don't know if you would.
Thank you. Vice Chair, the Vice Chair already asked the question I was going to ask. Thank you very much.
Okay, okay, not a problem. Other commissioners? All right, seeing none, we'll see this one and we will see you, Scott, at the public hearing on Wednesday. Thank you for that. We're now going to go to some Brooklyn pre-hearings, several of them. Ryan?
Thank you.
Yeah. So for our fifth item on the agenda is a pre-hearing review zoning map and zoning text amendment in Brooklyn Community District 1. And our presenter is Syed Ahmed. Syed? Do we have Syed on today? There he is. I can see him. Syed, I'm gonna ask you to unmute. There we go.
So, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hi there. Yes. Good afternoon, commissioners. This is a private application. It was certified on November 15 and is back for pre-hearing review. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes a zoning map amendment from R6 and R6C13 to R7X C24 district and a zoning text amendment to establish MIH area. The proposed actions would facilitate the development of an 8-story mixed-use building with 52 apartments, of which 16 would be permanently affordable, and approximately 7,700 square feet of ground floor commercial space would be provided. Next slide, please. The project area comprises of 2 properties. The development site 103 Lee Avenue is on the north side of Lee Avenue, outlined in red. Next slide, please. The other property is on the south side of Lee Avenue. It is a triangular shaped lot with a 1-story commercial building. This site is not in applicant's control. Next slide, please. The project area is located on the east side of BQE in Hasidic South Williamsburg. In Community District 1, Brooklyn, the surrounding area is developed with 3 to 4-story walk-ups and 5 to 6-story apartment buildings. Lee Avenue is the main commercial street in this neighborhood, with ground floor commercial uses serving the needs of the area residents. Next slide, please. The area is zoned R6, which permits residential uses at an FAR of 2.43 on narrow streets and at an FAR of 3 on wide streets. R6 district permits community facility uses at an FAR of 4.8. The project area is in transit zone. The J&M line station is 3 blocks north of the project area at Hughes Street and Broadway. The B54 bus line runs along Lee Avenue and provides service between Williamsburg and Sheepshead Bay. Next slide, please. The applicant site at present is developed with an as-of-right partially built 5-story structure for 27 market rate units. The top 2 photos show the partially built building. The construction of as-of-right building started prior to the filing of this application in 2019. However, the building is designed to support additional 3 floors if the proposed rezoning is approved. Next slide, please. The proposed rezoning to R7X C24 would add 3 floors and 25 additional units to the existing building. 16 of the 52 units on the site would be affordable. In existing R6 district, no affordable units are required. The mapping of C24 overlay would also allow 7,700 square feet of ground floor commercial space, which is also not permitted under the existing R6 zoning on the development site. The proposed R7X district allows residential buildings at an FAR of 5 and at an FAR of 6 with MIH area mapping. The proposed building would contain 52,952 square feet of floor area at a total FAR of 5.95. The base height in R7X district with MIH mapping ranges from 60 to 105 feet, and the maximum building height is 125 feet with qualifying ground floor. The proposed building is 84 feet high with no setbacks and would provide 15 required parking spaces in the cellar accessed from an existing curb cut on Lee Avenue. Next slide, please. The top left photo shows the other property in the rezoning area, 100 Lee Avenue. It is across the street from the applicant site and is not it is not controlled by the applicant. The triangular shaped lot outlined in red is 8,200 square feet in area and is developed with a one-story commercial building with 7 small retail stores. The applicant included this property in the rezoning area because it created a rational zoning boundary for this project area. Also, the rezoning of the site with MIH mapping would yield an additional 44 units, of which 13 would be permanently affordable in an area that desperately needs affordable housing. This is also the first MIH mapping in this area since 2016. Next slide, please. Community Board 1 approved the application with conditions by a vote of 27 in favor, 2 in opposition, and 2 abstentions. Community Board recommends that there should be a restrictive covenant restricting the height of the building to 8 stories, that the number of units will not be increased. The new zoning district should only cover applicant site. And finally, the applicant should reach out to local community and not-for-profit organizations about their plans going forward. Next slide, please. Brooklyn Borough President approved the application with conditions and submitted their recommendations on Friday, February 11th. In summary, Borough President recommended that MIH option 1 be selected instead of 2, that applicant provide improvements to pedestrian intersection to improve public safety, that the applicant gives written commitments to build no higher than 8 stories or increase the number of units beyond 52, that applicant commits to meetings with local stakeholders and use local housing not-for-profits to serve as administering agents. Applicant provide bike racks or docking stations. Coordinate with DEP, DOT, DPR to install DEP rain gardens. Explore additional resiliency and sustainability measures. And finally, to retain Brooklyn-based contractors and subcontractors. The applicant's attorney will be responding to these recommendations on Wednesday at the CPC public hearing. However, he has informed us of the following, that they have already chosen a local affordable housing administrating agent, Reside New York LLC. That MIH mapping is for option 1 and 2 and will provide them flexibility to choose the one appropriate here. They intend to keep the unit count to 52. There might be a slight change in number of units, but the residential floor area will remain as is. They have already started conversations with local organizations and not-for-profits regarding their plans going forward. They are in conversation with DOT to provide safe pedestrian intersection. And finally, regarding resiliency measures, they will consult with DEP and DPR and intend to provide a roof that will include solar photovoltaic systems. Thank you. This concludes my presentation, and I will be happy to answer questions you might.
Thank you very much, Syed. We appreciate it. Let me just start with one practical question about the current status of this building. You said it is half built and that the developer is waiting to see what happens with this application to see whether it can add an additional 3 floors and 25 units. Is that correct?
Yes, so the project started prior to the filing of this application, and his financing was in place and he didn't want to wait that long, so he started construction, but it is not completed.
So is it still, so has it stopped now pending
stopped
the
at
resolution
5
of this?
Yes, yes, it has stopped at 5 stories.
Okay.
It's not
Interesting.
finished yet.
Okay. All right. Let me go and see. Okay, Commissioner Marin.
There you go. You're muted, Commissioner.
There you go. How's that? So you actually answered one of my questions, and maybe you can elaborate further. You mentioned that the building was originally planned for, was it 4 or 5 stories? And now they're looking to add 3. They wanted to get their financing in place, so they rushed to get financing and close so they can get started. My question is, what is the structure of this building? Can it support another 3 floors?
The building started in 2018, and they filed for an application in 2019. And they have designed the building that if this rezoning is approved, they can add 3 more floors to the building, and they will be, instead of a 27 unit market rate building, it would be a 52 unit development with 16 affordable units.
Understood. So it was developed with contemplations of increasing density when it was first designed.
Yes.
Is what I'm trying to get at. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Commissioner Levin.
I guess I wonder what the fate of this application is, particularly with respect to the site across the street, why that needs to be included. And I think we have to recognize that this is just a straight rezoning application. So they have the potential, at least under zoning, to build to 145 feet on both sides of the street. Is that feasible? Is that what we should be having our eyes on here, despite what the this applicant says they're going to do? Because I would think that scale is pretty out of scale with that neighborhood. We can't enforce the reduced commitments that the applicant has apparently made to the community. So
you're right, Commissioner, that the proposed rezoning would permit a 14-story building, but this intersection is right next to BQE, and it is a very wide intersection. And we believe that it is an appropriate density and appropriate district for this intersection. And applicant reached out to the property owner at 100 Lee Avenue, and the applicant would discuss, would reveal what they have found out. They said that the across the street applicant is not at this point proposing to build anything, but it could happen in the future.
Okay, but so then is staff still, well, what is the agency's position on including the building across the street? Is that the site across the street, is that an integral part of what we're doing here?
Yes, it creates a rational zoning boundary instead of just rezoning applicants small.
Instead of a spot zoning. Okay.
Yes, and it would yield 44 units of housing in the future, 13 of which would be affordable.
Okay, which the owner says isn't going to happen. Okay.
Not in anytime soon or immediately.
All right. Well, we'll hear more on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. And with that, I think you've laid it out perfectly. We will, in fact, hear it on Wednesday. So we're going to hold off on the rest of this until then. It's the public hearing. Thank you, Syed. We're now going to go to 1220 Avenue P. Ryan.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Syed. This is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Brooklyn Community District 15, and our presenter is Colin Lee. Colin?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
All right, and this is a private application by Omni Enterprises LLC for an enlargement to the existing Levitt Medical Center at 1220 Avenue P. This application certified on November 1st, 2021, and it's returning for pre-hearing. Next slide. And this project is in the borough of Brooklyn, in Midwood neighborhood, in Community District 15. And on the map, you can see the rezoning area is outlined in red. Next slide. And the actions would facilitate a 4-story use group 4 enlargement to the medical center with approximately 11,240 square feet of additional floor area. The proposed 4-story enlargement will be constructed towards the rear of the existing building along East 13th Street. No parking is required since use group 4 ambulatory diagnostic or treatment care facilities in R7A districts do not require parking. The applicants are proposing 6 accessory parking spaces to the west of the enlargement on East 12th Street. Also, according to the applicant, the expansion would allow the medical center to serve an increased demand for healthcare and medical services in the community. It would also introduce subspecialists, primary care physicians in areas such as rheumatology, radio-oncology, and surgery. Today, the existing medical center employs 200 medical and administrative staff. Next slide. And in order to facilitate the development, the applicant is seeking a zoning map amendment from an R5B to an R7A district and a zoning text amendment to map the project area as MIH. The applicants are mapping R7A and including the 3 lots to the west of the development sites block to be consistent with the existing R7A district boundaries to the west along Coney Island Avenue. The maximum height in an R7A district is 80 feet or 85 feet with a qualifying ground floor. The proposed enlargement is adjacent to the R5B district, which limits the maximum height of the building to 55 feet in the proposed R7A district. The applicants are proposing a maximum height of 47 feet, 10 inches on the proposed enlargement to line up with the existing building. The maximum FAR for community facilities in an R7A district is 4. The proposed enlargement combined with the existing square footage will result in a development of 31,696 square feet at a total FAR 3.17. Also, the applicants are mapping MIH to the project area, which could potentially result in income restricted dwelling units in the future, but the proposed development does not contain any new residential use. Next slide. And Brooklyn Community Board 15 held a public meeting and vote in December 2021 with a vote of 37 against and 2 in favor. The board stated that the increased density to an already heavily populated area will immediately congest the neighborhood. There's very little parking and too much traffic currently, and the board voted no. Next slide. And the Brooklyn Borough President held a public meeting in January and approved the application with conditions. The conditions are establishing ambulatory parking signage along East 13th Street, prioritizing local hiring and retaining local contractors and material suppliers, encourage DCP and DOT to address reported pedestrian safety and vehicular conflicts along Avenue P by developing an enforcement mechanism to prevent double parking along Avenue P and nearby side streets, and develop a plan to minimize traffic congestion from nearby schools due to school buses parking near the medical center. And the last condition is a written commitment from the applicants to develop parking lots on properties to the rear of the medical center and restrict parking for patient use only, and to coordinate with DOT to provide a designated drop-off and pickup area along East 13th Street. And this concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Colin, very much. One question from me before I go to the rest of the commission. The community board was just a straight up no. Did they explain themselves at all in the materials that we got?
Yes, I just mentioned that
Those were the borough,
that, due to the increased density.
were those the borough? I heard the borough president.
Yeah,
I
that's
saw the
from
borough president.
I'm sorry. That's for the community board. That was the
Yeah.
community board. The Brooklyn Borough president voted yes, but he approved it with conditions. And I went through the conditions on the last slide.
Okay, go back for a sec, because I may have missed it. Let's go back to the presentation for a minute.
Sure.
Just want to make sure
Can we
I
get
got it right.
presentation up? I think it's Colin. Do you know the slide number? We can get right to it.
It's I don't know slide number off the top.
That's okay. We'll get it up.
I think it's that the community board voted against it for increased density. But the borough president.
I think that's site.
Right?
No, that's
one more slide.
That's Syed's presentation.
Oh yeah, whoops.
Yeah,
wrong
Syed.
presentation.
Actually, it's not mine.
Sorry about that. We'll get that up.
This is a little bit out of turn, but I happen to be looking at the screen with the community board's recommendation. They didn't send a big letter. They just said the increased density to an already heavily populated area will immensely congest this neighborhood. There's very little parking and too much traffic concurrently.
Okay, there it is. Okay, that helps. Thank you, Commissioner. That's what I was looking for. Great. Thank you. I saw this slide over here. Really, it was the 37 against, 2 in favor. But that sounds like I now know what their rationale was. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Colin. All right, let's see who else has something to say here. We've got Commissioner Burney. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't quite tell from the presentation whether the applicant is planning on renovating the existing building. It kind of looks that way from the rendering because some of the fenestrations changed at the ground level. But I'm wondering if they can do something about that rather unfortunate carbuncle that's on the front of the building on, I guess it's on Avenue P, to use the medical term. It looks as though it projects beyond over the sidewalk in a way that wouldn't be allowed by building code anyway. So I'm just wondering if that's something they might address.
Yes, that's a good question. I'm not really sure about that portion of the building, but the applicants can answer to that on Wednesday, and I can let them know.
Okay.
In terms of the full
that's
application, there's
Colin, if I could just jump in, that's actually an existing condition.
Go for it.
Today.
Yeah, I know, but it does look as though they're renovating the building. If you look at the 2 renderings, it's sort of existing. So it would be an opportunity if they are. If not, then of course, that's another matter. Thank you.
Chair, you are muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Commissioner Dweck.
Hi, thank you. Colin, do you know if the community board will be attending the public meeting on Wednesday?
I don't think so, but is there any reason why?
Yeah, I'd love to get some input as to what would be acceptable to them in that area.
Okay.
We can certainly remind them of the public hearing, and if they wish to testify, that they have the ability to do so. Commissioner Dweck.
I couldn't hear you, Winston. Can you repeat that?
I can do it. He said that they'll make them aware of the fact that the hearing is happening and see if they have any interest in coming. So thank you, Winston.
Thank you, Winston.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Dweck. Let's go to Commissioner Levin.
Yes, I'd like to ask about the portion that's not the project, that is the project area, but it's not the development site, the little bit to the, I guess it's the west, projected development site 2, occupied by 3 houses, 3 residential buildings. What kind of displacement pressures is this going to put on the folks who live there? Are those rent regulated? I can't imagine they are. How occupied are they, and what are what's the likelihood that this, I guess the EAS process at least imagines that this is a potential development site. So who's living there and what's this going to do for them?
In terms of those 3 sites, those are all from the previous presentation. I mentioned those were single family homes, and one of them is an office use, similar to a medical office use, which is the lot closest to the school that's on the same block as the medical center. And yes, in the EAS, they can be assembled as, one development parcel. So that's like 10,000 square feet combined, and could potentially be a new residential building. So yes.
So but the 2 that are being used as residential buildings, are those owner occupied?
I'm actually not sure if they're owner occupied, but I can provide that information for the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Seeing no other commissioners on this item, we will see you again, Colin, on Wednesday. Thank you very much for that. We'll now go to 3285 Fulton Street. Ryan?
Okay, yes, this is the 7th item on our agenda, and it's a preview and review of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Brooklyn Community District 5, and our presenter is Alexandra Patty Diaz.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Yeah, this is an application that is coming back for public hearing to facilitate the development of a new senior housing and a daycare center in East New York. Next. The applicant, Cypress Hill Local Development Corporation and Manny Management, are requesting a series of land use actions that are a zoning map amendment, a zoning text amendment for a new MH area, and a zoning text amendment to extend the Special Enhanced Commercial District 6 to facilitate this development. And wanted to point out to the commission that this project will be financed in conjunction with the sites that the commission saw in December called Sutter Place Cluster from HPD. Next. The project area is in East New York, neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 5. Next. And is located in Cypress Hill at the northeastern corner of Fulton Street and Euclid Avenue. It is located just outside, if we can go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. The site is located just outside the eastern boundary of the East New York rezoning area, as it sits on Euclid and Fulton Street. And a lot of the developments that were facilitated through the neighborhood plan are located in close proximity to the development site, as pointed out in the map. This area is also well served by public transit. Next. The development site is an irregular shaped rectangular corner lot containing approximately 4,000 square feet of area, with frontage on Fulton Street and Euclid Avenue, and is currently improved with a 3-story building, which is vacant, and its latest use was a funeral home. Next. The applicant is proposing a new 7-story building with approximately 17,000 square feet of residential areas use, producing at the time of filing the application was 33 dwelling units. And we have heard from the applicant that now are 27 units and approximately 2,700 square feet of community facility use space, which also it is the numbers at the time of the application was filed, and the applicant will provide an update during the public hearing. And this space will be located, daycare will be located in both the ground floor and the first floor. Next. In order to facilitate the development, the applicant is requesting a zoning map amendment to rezone a portion of block 4129 within 100 feet of Fulton Street from an R5 C23 district to an R7A C24 EC6 district. To remove the 2-3 overlay from the portion beyond the 100 feet from Fulton Avenue, part of the district will become just R5. Next. This change also triggers the need to map a new MIH area within Appendix F of our zoning resolution. Next. And in order also to extend the special enhanced commercial district across the project area, the description of the area covered by the EC6 in the section of 13211F of the zoning resolution must be amended to describe that this commercial district goes up to Pine Street. Next. The department certified the project in November 1st of last year. Community Board 5 held a hearing in January and recommended not to approve the application. In January as well, the BP, the Borough President of Brooklyn, held a hearing and recommended to approve the application with conditions. Next. The conditions are that the CPC or City Council modified the requested rezoning as follows. So the R7A and subsequent MIH districts to be applied to the applicant property, and also for the zoning area to be reduced only to the center line of the block front along Fulton Street, and then to map R6B with MIH over the remaining of the project area, which are corresponding to the log 65, 66, and 67. The Board President also recommended that the co-developers provide more studios at 40% AMI to achieve also 1-bedroom units to 50% AMI, that HPD coordinate with DHS to identify and recruit potential tenants among current and former residents of Community District 5 to fill units set aside for formerly homeless, and that prior to considering the application, the City Council obtains agreements from the applicant team to incorporate resiliency and sustainability measures, to coordinate extensions of curb cut and or protect the paint and sidewalks in order to improve the pedestrian experience along the streets, and also to coordinate with the appropriate agencies to install rain gardens along Eclair Avenue. That concludes my, and the commission will hear this project from the applicant team on Wednesday. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. We'll look forward to continuing this on Wednesday. Let me see if there are questions from the commissioners present. Commissioners? Any questions here? Going once, going twice. All right, Alexandra, you're off scot-free here. We'll move on to the next one. Thank you. We'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you for that. We're going to take that one to the public hearing on Wednesday, the 16th. Ryan, we're going to go back to you on 250 East 83rd Street transit easement. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Levy, you don't have a question, do you? You came up on my screen, but no, right? We're good. Okay. All right, Ryan.
Okay.
All yours.
The eighth item on our agenda is a post-referral review of a city planning commission certification that no transit easement is required. This is a joint certification with the MTA. There was a briefing in your package, and the MTA has indicated that no easement is necessary at the site, and the community board has concurred with that as well. So staff is here if there are any questions.
Great. Are there any questions? It's a pretty simple one, it looks to me. Any questions, comments on this? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for assent by a voice vote to send this letter to the buildings department. So all of those who are in favor, please say yay.
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 Any
Yay.
opposed, say nay. All right, the yays, the ayes have it. So Ryan,
Right.
we're done with this one. Now for future votes.
Yep. For future votes, staff have prepared reports for consideration on Wednesday, February 16th, 2022 for 660, 668 East Fordham Road. As usual, if there are any questions, you guys can raise your hands and stop me. 1034, 1042 Atlantic Avenue rezoning, 870, 888 Atlantic Avenue rezoning, Sutphin Boulevard, this is the downtown Jamaica bid expansion, 9881 Queens Boulevard rezoning, the West Village bid formation, and the new Providence redevelopment, 225 East 45th Street. I will note for that one that Commissioner Cirillo is recused. Also scheduled for a vote on Wednesday are 57 St. James Place and 303 Flag Place, which are special district actions in Staten Island. All right. And then for post-hearing follow-up, we have one item, the Sutter Avenue rezoning. If there are any further questions or discussion on that, staff didn't feel their need for any follow-up unless there's any questions.
Any questions from the commission on anything at all before we close today? I will note that we will come back to you with information about the location for Wednesday. As you know, we are preparing for an in-person, but we may be virtual. We don't know exactly. We're going to wait for instruction through executive order. So we will let you know, but please keep your calendars free and clear. And one final scan here. I see no hands. So with that, unless there's any objection and with no further business today, seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all. I do want to recognize the hard work of the staff of the department. They are an incredible bunch. I see it now with my own eyes, how talented and hardworking they are. I want to thank them for everything they did today in preparation for this meeting and clearly for the months and months preceding it. So thank you all. And I will see you all on Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Wednesday, welcome aboard.